Hello everyone, I'm Pratibha Sharma, PGT Biology from Kendra Vidyalaya, Junagadh. Today, in chapter number 2 of Standard 12th, we are going to discuss the topic pollination. In my earlier classes, I discussed about the development of male and female gametophyte. So, in all flowering plants, the flowers produce male and female gametophyte. These gametophyte then produces the gametes. And since both male and female gamete produced by the flower, they are non-motile. Okay, so in order to carry out fertilization, the transfer of pollen grain must take place and it must reach to the stigma so that the male gametes present in it could fertilize the egg present in the ovule. So how this is achieved, how this transfer is taking place. So the process by which the pollen grains are transferred to the stigma is known as pollination. So today we are going to study in detail about pollination. So you can define pollination as a process in which pollens produced by the anther are transferred to the stigma of a pistil. Depending upon the source of pollen, the pollination is divided into three types. First is autogamy, which is also known as self-pollination. This type of pollination occurs in bisexual flowers, which are having both stamen and pistil. So here the transfer of pollen is taking place from the anther to the pistil of the same flower. So it is known as either autogamy or self-pollination. Second is gymnogamy. It is the pollination which occurs between two flowers which are located on the same plant. So such type of pollination is known as gymnogamous pollination. And the third type is there, that is xenogamy. Here the transfer of pollen is taking place from one flower to another, and these flowers are present on two different individual plants. So it is known as cross-pollination or xenogamy. So first we'll study what are the requirements for self-pollination. So first very important thing is the flower must be bisexual. Then only self-pollination is possible. Second, there must be synchrony between the release of pollen and receptivity of stigma. And this is achieved when both stamen and pistil, they attain maturity at the same time. Next, the anther and stigma, they must lie close to each other. So all bisexual flowers, they may undergo self-pollination, but since their anther and stigma, they are exposed. Okay, as the flowers, they open at maturity and their anther and stigma are exposed. So they might get cross-pollinated too. Now some plants are there like Viola, Oxalis, Commelina. They produce two kinds of flowers. Like here you can see the example of Commelina. The flowers which are produced by the plant above the ground, they are known as chasmoglamous flowers. These flowers, they open at maturity and thus they exposes their stamen and stigma. The second type of flowers are clistogamous flowers, and these are the flowers which are produced under the ground by the plants. These flowers, they never open. At maturity also, they remain closed. Their stigma and anther, they are very close to each other and thus they are invariably autogamous. Since there is no chance of external pollen grain reaching the stigma of these flowers. So such flowers, they produce assured seed sets. 100% the seeds are going to form inside such flowers. These are the pictures of Viola plant, which is commonly known as common pensy. These are purple colored chasmogamous flowers having exposed stamen and stigma. These are clistogamous flowers, and this is the seed pod formed under the ground after autogamy. Next, what are the requirements for gymnogamy? Gymnogamy is taking place between flowers located on the same plant. Example, cucurbit. So in the cucurbids, they produce unisexual flowers. Both pistillate and staminate flowers are present on the same plant. So when pollination occurs between them, then such pollination is known as gymnogamous pollination. Functionally, it is cross-pollination because for carrying pollen from one flower to another, an external agent, a pollinator, is always needed. But genetically, it is autogamy because the flowers, they are genetically similar as they belong to the same plant. The third type is xenogamy or cross-pollination. This type of pollination occurs between two genetically different plants. So, for the transfer of pollen grain from one plant to another, the external pollinator is required. Now, these external agents are known as pollination agents. They are divided into two categories, abiotic and biotic. Abiotic agents are non-living agents like wind and water. Biotic agents are living agents which carry out pollination. Example, birds, insects, bats, etc. So today we are going to study what are the floral adaptations seen in different plants pollinated by these different pollination agents. So first we'll study about anemophily. So it is the pollination which is carried out by wind. Now, wind pollinated flowers, they are usually small in size and inconspicuous. So they are present in cluster and are arranged in inflorescence. Their non-essential floral parts like petals or sepals, they are either absent or are highly reduced. These flowers, they are colorless, odorless and nectarless since they don't need to attract any insect or biotic agent. So they don't waste their energy in producing color or fragrance or nectar. Now, if the flowers are unisexual, so in that case, they produce large number of male flowers. But if the flowers are bisexual, then in that bisexual flower, the number of stamens are more as compared to pistils. And pistils, they generally contain one ovule or very few ovules in their ovary. Because if they produce large number of ovules, the chances of these ovules to get fertilized is very low, as the chance of stigma to receive the large number of pollen grain is very less. Wind pollinated flowers, their stigma and anther both are exerted. The anthers of Anemophilous flowers, they are versatile. That is, they are attached to the filament at a single point, due to which when the wind blows, they swing in the air and releases the pollens stored inside them. Stigma of anemophilous flowers, they are hairy, feathery or branched in order to trap the pollen grains floating in the air. The pollen grains of anemophilous flowers are produced in large number in order to compensate the loss which occurs during their transport. As anemophily is a wasteful process and it is non-directional. For example, in maize, the male inflorescence produces 20 to 25 million pollen grains. The pollen grains, they are very small in size, light in weight, and winged or dusty so that the wind can easily carry them to the long distance. Their surface is smooth, dry, and non-sticky, as well as unwettable. This is the maize plant, and here you can see this at the top there is male inflorescence and here female inflorescence is there. So tassels of the female inflorescence, that is the silk thread which you see, these are nothing but stigma and style which wave in the air in order to trap the pollen grains. So this is the summary of anemophilous flowers. So they have specific kind of pollen grains. Their anther and stigma, they are exposed. Stigma is feathery in order to trap the pollen grains. They are not producing any kind of nectar, fragrance or color, as they don't waste their energy in doing so. And petals and sepals, they are highly reduced or they might be absent. Next we'll study about hydrophily. Hydrophily is the pollination carried out through water. It is observed in aquatic plants, but only 30 genera of aquatic plants are there which are mainly monophores where water pollination is taking place. Their examples are freshwater plants are Vallisneria and Hydrilla. Then there are several marine grasses like Jostera. This is Hydrilla. Now in majority of aquatic plants like the Nilumbo lotus or water hyacinth, water lily, we find that their flowers emerges above the level of water. In many of them, the flowers are very beautiful and they attract insects for their pollination. So, majority of aquatic plants, their flowers are pollinated by either wind or insect. And as we discussed, there are only 30 genera where the pollination is by water. In that, first we'll study the example of Vallisneria. So Vallisneria is an aquatic hydrophyte and it is dioecious. The plant is having ribbon-shaped leaves. The female plant produces pistillate flowers which develops under the water and they have a long coiled stalk. As they mature, the coiled stalk it uncoils and brings them to the surface of water. Whereas the staminate flowers have short stalk and they produce pollen grains. As the male flowers, they mature, they are released into the water. They detach from the inflorescence and they are released into the water. So these male flowers, they have two stamens which are filled with pollen grain. They are light in weight and they are carried passively by the water current to the surface of water where the pistillate flowers are there. Now, some of the male flowers which comes near the pistillate flower, they falls in the depression, the cup-shaped depression formed in the pistillate flower's stigma. And thus they burst and releases their pollen grain on the surface of stigma and causes pollination. After pollination, the stalk of the pistillate flower, it again coils and the flower goes down inside the water. And further development is taking place inside the water. Let's take another example, that is of sea grasses like Jostera. So in case of sea grasses, the male and female flowers both are submerged in water. The male produces ribbon-shaped pollen grains, and these pollen grains are carried passively by the water current to the female flower where they ensure pollination. Pollens of water-pollinated plants, they are coated with mucilage which protects them from getting wet. So that is about hydrophily. Next, coming to entomophily. Entomophily is the pollination carried out by insects like moths, butterflies, wasps, bees, beetles, etc. Nearly 80% of the insect pollinated flowers are pollinated by bees. Rest 20% are pollinated by other insects. Entomophilous flowers, they have certain adaptations or certain features due to which they attract their pollinators to ensure pollination. First is, the flowers are usually large in size, they are bright and colorful. If they are small, then they are present in inflorescence. So, their beautiful color attracts the insects. They are fragrant, they produce very good fragrance and nectar. Nectar and some of the flowers, they produce edible pollen grains. So nectar and pollen grains, they are the usual floral rewards which they provide to visiting insects. The pollen grains, they are sticky and spiny. So they, once an insect visits the flower, it sticks to the body of the insect. Now, in some flowers, in spite of giving nectar or pollen grain, they give some other rewards to the visiting pollinator. Like in Yucca and Amorphophilus, they provide safe place to insects for laying their eggs. They provide place, their ovaries are the place where they deposit their eggs, and in this way their life cycle gets completed. Okay. So this is yucca flower and moth. They shows mutualism. The moth which pollinates yucca flower is Tegiticula. This Tegiticula, it visits the yucca flowers to lay or to deposit its eggs in the locules of their ovary. And during this process, they carry pollination of the flower. So, life cycle of yucca and moth, both are dependent on each other. Same way, Amorphophilus is also providing the safe place for deposition of egg. Amorphophilus is the tallest flower of the world and its height is 6 feet, commonly known as elephant yam. Next, coming to ornithophily. Ornithophily means pollination carried out by birds. So only few types of birds are there which are specialized to carry out pollination. And such birds, they have long beak and they are small in size. Ornithophilous flowers, they also have specific characteristics which attract their bird pollinators. These ornithophilous flowers are usually brightly colored, red, orange, yellow or blue. Their floral parts are leathery. Corolla forms a tube-like structure at the base of which the nectaries are present which secrete large amount of watery mucilaginous for the birds. They do not produce any kind of scent. So just summarize the entire topic. Pollination. We studied that pollination is of two types, self-pollination or cross-pollination. Self-pollination, if it is taking place in the same flower, it is called autogamy. If it is between flowers present on same plant, two flowers present on same plant, then it is called gymnogamy. Cross-pollination, that is between two flowers on two different plants. It requires pollinating agents, which may be abiotic, that is non-living agent, and living agent, that is biotic. Under abiotic, the pollinators may be wind or water. Biotic pollinators are snails, that is called malacophily, insects, entomophily, birds, ornithophily, bats, chiropterophily, and other vertebrates, zoophily. So this is all under pollination. Moving to the questions. These are the few questions which I have noted and which are being asked in board exams in different years. Go through the questions, solve them, and if you find any difficulty, you can ask in the comment section. If you like my video, please give a thumbs up and do subscribe to my channel for getting latest updates.